Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you're with us. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org. So many of you have joined us there from all over the world, and we're grateful. The purpose here is to inspire, to honor, to encourage, to educate, and to empower. And we've had so many wonderful guests that have done those things. We've been inspired by stories of people you've never heard of, some people you have heard of, some of them in between, young and old, all walks of life, all professions. So it's been a really wonderful journey we've been on. So thank you for being here with us. I'm really excited about my guest today. He's a dear friend, in addition to being a corporate executive, and you're going to hear the rest of the story in a moment. John Mullen is with me. John, welcome.
Great to be here.
John is Bachelor of Science from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in Civil Engineering and a Master's in Global Leadership from Fuller Seminary. That's kind of an interesting combination. That really summarizes you in some ways. that combination, Civil Engineering and Global Leadership from Fuller Seminary.
Well, I wasn't a great civil engineer, so I moved on to the spiritual side to try that.
Good. John's companies over the years have grossed over $500 million in sales, and so John was really successful in business. But that's actually not even the most interesting part of the story. But let's start with your life, though. Let's start with kind of your growing up, what it was like for you coming up, and your family of origin. Start there.
Sure. So we moved down here to Santa Barbara when I was 7 years old, and my dad was an entrepreneur. He died at 92 years old, and he was still entrepreneuring at 92. And so he was an incredible inspiration in my life. And when I was growing up in Santa Barbara, because we're a beach community, all my friends would surf, right, when I was a teen. Well, my dad had me working at his factory. So my dad manufactured furniture, so I would spend 8 hours a day, I think making $2 an hour during my summer working for my dad. Wow. But during that time, I was able to just watch him. He was incredibly gifted. He was an industrial designer. And so I just sat back and saw this incredible model in my life of someone who cared deeply about what he was doing. And so as I was growing up and getting older, I began to kind of look at, what do I want to do with my life? And I knew that I didn't want to follow exactly in his footsteps, but I knew I wanted to go to college. And it's really interesting because when I tell my kids this story, when I was in 6th grade at Monroe School in Santa Barbara, I ran for president. And I still remember who I ran against. I still remember all that happened. I didn't win. I lost. And I told my kids, I said, I lost as president, so later on I built my own companies and named myself president. So it all worked out.
Right, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And didn't your dad, weren't you like 33 or something, and your dad came to you and said, Johnny, it's your time?
Yeah, I graduated from Cal Poly University in civil engineering, came to Santa Barbara and worked as a civil engineer, and then began with a land development company because my desire was ultimately to become a real estate developer. And around when I was 32 years old, working for this land development company owned by a family, they decided to wind down the operations. And I still remember, like at that time, just, what am I going to do? And I called my dad, and at that point my dad was in Chicago. And we're on the phone, and he just said, Johnny, it's your time. And I said, well, what do you mean, Dad? He said, look, you've got this entrepreneurial blood. It's time for you to start your own company. So literally, as I was winding down from that company, I still remember I was in their offices, and this was a point where there were now computers and printers, and I'm printing out my resume, I'm printing out all these proposals. While I'm winding down in this one company, I'm starting up a new business. And so that was the beginning of JM Consulting Group, which I always said, well, it was only me, but it will ultimately grow. And it did. It grew into about 250 employees.
That's incredible. And so you had the JM Consulting, and then you had the development side. where you've done a ton of residential, 500 home or 700 residential homes in Southern California.
Yeah, so in the 90s, while I was doing real estate consulting, the wireless, the FCC began to issue licenses for wireless phones. And so if you remember in the early 90s, we started getting these cell phones. We moved into that industry, so I became a wireless telecom consultant, and that grew our business in the 90s. And then in the mid 90s, my dream was to do real estate development, and so I formed JM Development. So we had two companies, and then in the 2000s, we were building about 100 homes a year in the Central Coast.
Yeah, the wireless phone thing kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Yeah, it sure did.
Let's fast forward to 2002. And talk about your journey with some of this, I don't know if I want to call it mission work, but some of this overseas work that you've done, specifically around the country of Mozambique, which I didn't know a lot about. I did read a little bit about the cyclones and the poverty and the landmines. And that 11% of girls go beyond elementary school, and so it was interesting to read about this. But you ended up in Mozambique in 2002. Start there and kind of tell us what that was about,
Sure.
And then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so at that time, I was in my late 40s. I had been very successful in business, and I literally was close to retirement if I would choose to retire. And so, and I had been involved in, some mission work, like we all do, go on a 3-day trip, but I'd never really gone to a third world country. And I was invited to go to Mozambique. I didn't know a lot about Mozambique. Literally, I had to look at it on a map to find out where it was, and found out it was one of the poorest countries in the world. I agreed to go on this missions trip with my friend Douglas Bowman, and I remember, this kind of evolving revelation of Mozambique. Initially, it's like, this will be a great trip. This will be fun. I'll tag this on to what I've already done, my successful career. And I remember, as I found out more and more, I found out, well, this is a country that's gone through civil war. It's a country that's had massive flooding. In a country where there was 1 million landmines that were laid in the ground. So I start getting this fear about going down to Mozambique. Right. At that point, I can't back out. And so I remember Douglas and I flew to Atlanta, and we're about to get on the plane in Atlanta. We were going with a missions organization. And I'm at the counter, to pick up my seats. And this woman goes, Mr. Mullen, I know that you had tickets in row 15A, and I had flown enough, a 747-400 to know that that's in business class. And I thought, this is a great missions organization. She goes, Mr. Mullen, I'm sorry, we've made a big mistake. You're not in 15A. You're in the middle of row 73. Now, I remember walking down that aisle all the way to the back of the plane, clutching my overnight bag like it was a life preserver. And I literally am going, where am I going? And I ended up in the back of the plane in the middle seat. And I finally get myself into that middle seat, and I've got a guy to the right of me and a guy to the left of me, and they're both going on this missions trip. And I turn to the guy at the right, and I'm looking at him. He's missing a finger on one of his hands. And I turned to him and I said, hey, I know we're going to the same place. My doctor told me if I take the malaria medication, I'll just be fine, I'll be safe. And he looks back at me and goes, I was a missionary for 6 years in East Africa. I took the medication. I still got malaria. So now I'm convinced I'm going to die. I'm going to die in this third world country that I know nothing about. I turn to my left, and there's this big oversized guy that's spilling over into my seat. And I remember when the plane was ready to go, there was a seat available. I could see that was a window seat. And I thought, gosh, I want that seat. And so I turned to him and I say, hey, I can give you a little bit more room, and I'm going to go get that seat. And he turns to me and he puts his arm around and he goes, no way, I want to get to know you. And so I'm going,
Really?
stuck 17 hours between these two. I'm sandwiched between these two guys.
Oh my God.
And so, we flew down to Cape Town, and then from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and then we flew into Mozambique. And I remember, I just thought, I'm going to my death. I mean, like, I'm not going to survive in this country. And so we get there, we arrive in Maputo, Mozambique, which is the capital. And we're going to a place in Sempeto where this conference center is, but where they have a children's center. And I remember arriving there, and they took us out to see this dump site in the middle of the city. And you got to realize, like in Mozambique, I mean, this is a country where the average person lives on about $1.50 a day. So it's an extremely poor country. And they take us out to this dump site, and at this dump site, people, I mean, it's not a dump site like we're used to. This is a dump site where people live in the dump. They literally live there. And so they live in cardboard houses. The trash trucks come in. They're climbing all over the trash trucks trying to get food. And this is how these people live. And I remember there was a phrase that they would use, that this ministry would use, and it was "stop for the one." And what they said was, we're going to stop for that one person that's in front of us, the one person that's broken, the one person that's an amputee. That's the person we're going to focus on. And it just really, really stuck with me. So we were there for 10 days just watching this ministry. And it was changing my heart. I mean, I literally was realizing, like, I've never experienced this before in my life. And it was just amazing. We get to the last night, and we had been at a village the day before, and I had eaten some food, and I was very sick. This is the night before we're going to leave and come back home. And they line up everybody on this concrete wall because the head of this ministry, Heidi Baker, was going to come and pray for everyone. And I thought, yeah, I need prayer, and I'd like her to pray for me. So I'm waiting, and she never gets to me. But 3 13-year-old Mozambican boys, they come and they lay a prayer cloth on me. And they lay hands on me, and as they begin to pray over me, I just start weeping, and I can't stop weeping. And I realize, like, God has brought me halfway around the world. And I've been a Christian for 20 years, but He brought me halfway around the world that I might meet Jesus. And I met Jesus right there because I realized, as wealthy as I was coming from the United States, I was poor. And He was calling me to be a person who was poor in spirit. So that was my first encounter with Mozambique.
Wow. That's amazing. Let's go to 2015, and then I want to get back to that in terms of what happened to you. But so 2015, you end up reconnecting with Douglas Bowman. You're taking a walk on the beach in Santa Barbara, and kind of take us from there in terms of what happened and how we get to this story, which, by the way, I will mention now, John, they've written a great book that I was reading last night called Florencia. We're going to talk about Florencia in a second, but I commend it to you. It's a really great book. But take us 2015 and how we got to Florencia.
Douglas and I were on the trip in 2002 in Mozambique, and then we both come back, and our lives kind of, move away from one another. He goes to New Zealand as a pastor. I continue in business in the early 2000s, kind of go back to what I was doing, and he went back to what he was doing beforehand. And in 2015, we reconnect. He comes back to Santa Barbara, and I haven't seen him for quite some time. And we begin to just take these walks. And as we're walking, we are reminiscing about what happened in Mozambique and realizing, like, this was a pivotal moment in both of our lives. So we think, well, let's write a book. Let's write a book about our experience in Mozambique. And really, from sort of a Westerner perspective, it was really, let's write a selfie book. Let's write a book about ourselves, because we think all these people are going to be interested in who we are. And
my
so,
road to humility.
Well, yeah, I know, my road,
My 5 secrets to success.
Yeah,
being
exactly.
humble.
And so we began to write this book. We wrote 13 chapters of this book. And we're starting, in chapter 13, we're starting to really look into Mozambique and look into these floods and look into the depth of the poverty. And one of the things we come upon is that these landmines were in Mozambique. And so these are landmines that had been put in the ground because there was a civil war that was going on. So they're putting them in the ground regarding the opposing army, right? But they're left there, and they're left there for years. And so now, and a landmine's not discriminating. It doesn't know who's above the ground. And so now they're sitting in the waterways, they're sitting in the pathways, and civilians are stepping on these landmines. And it's just devastating what's going on in this country. So as we're doing our research, we find this article in National Geographic. It's an article on the demining efforts in Mozambique that are taking place. And in those demining efforts, they're talking about women going into demining, helping to demine the country, and going from $1.50 a day to $10 a day. And we thought, gosh, this is great. Well, the last paragraph of that article, as if it's an afterthought, they tell us about this 17-year-old girl, Florencia. They show us a picture of her, and they tell us her story. And in her story, we learn that she was out collecting firewood. She lived in a village, Macachula, in Mozambique. She's out collecting firewood, and it's just a regular day, and she's reaching to get a piece of firewood, and she steps on a landmine, and it blows off her leg. And it's just there's this massive gnarled flesh. She's lying there, and all her mother sees from her hut is this smoke rising, off in the distance. And they run, and they find Florencia. She's lying on the ground, and she's half dead. And this paragraph is telling us about her story as a kind of an afterthought, And Douglas and I read that, and we thought, how can we write a selfie book and not tell her story? How can we not find her? Like, we need to locate this woman. We need to bring her help, And so that began this journey in finding Florencia.
And it's amazing she survived. Didn't they have to drive 4 hours to the hospital?
They had to take her 4 hours because in Macachula, like even when we went back down there, you're driving off the road into the sand, going to the bush country, and you realize, it's not like America. They're not heading over to CVS to pick up their medication. They're not heading over to Cottage Hospital to receive care. They have to be taken, somewhere 2 to 4 hours away. And again, she's dying in the back of a pickup truck while this is all taking place.
When she stepped on the landmine, her leg was blown off. She had cashews in her pocket. The cashews fell on the ground, and we'll get back to that at the end.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Cashews falling on the ground. Now, you read the article, let's do something, let's find her. You rally a group of students from the local high school who want to help, want to go on the trip, and take us from there.
Yeah, so what really happens is we take the article and we look at it and we go, first of all, who wrote the article? Well, we find out that the woman who wrote the article was Claudia Sangel. She was an adjunct professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And we're like, we can't believe this for National Geographic. So we contact her, we write her an email, and she writes back. And all we say is, hey, we're two guys here in Santa Barbara. We learned about Florencia. You did an article on her, which means you went down there. We'd like to help her. We'd like to help her in some way, in some manner. And she writes back and she says, hey, if you want to help her, here's the contact in Mozambique. His name's Adorito Ismael. Now, he was with Handicap International, and he was a deminer, but he was the one who originally brought Claudia up to Macachula to interview Florencia. So we contact Adorito Ismael. Now, this is a guy that is busy. He's got a lot going on. We don't hear anything back. It's 2 weeks later. And finally, he's looking at his emails and he sees our email. And he realizes, oh my gosh, there's these two guys that are in California and they want to help Florencia. So he spends 2.5 days out of his schedule and goes up into her village to find her. When he finds her, he takes a letter from us to, to say, introduce who we are and to say, we'd like to help her get a prosthetic leg. So he's with her and he's talking with her and he says, these guys would like to help you get a prosthetic leg. And her response to that was, what's a prosthetic leg? She had no idea, because in Mozambique, those who are amputees often crawl on the ground, or they have makeshift crutches, but they don't have the technology. They don't know about a prosthetic leg. So anyway, but he said, look at Florencia, there's two guys in California that want to help you walk. Do you want to walk again? And she nodded. She had her little son, Gildo, who she couldn't carry. And she really, her life had been completely just cut off and limited because she was an amputee. So we found Florencia through Adorito. And then from that point, we began to look at, okay, how do we, we promised something here, how do we deliver on our promise? Well, the tough news was that it would cost $12,000 to $15,000 to get a prosthetic leg in Mozambique. And we just thought, well, we don't even know where to begin. We don't know what to do. So the second thing we did is we got back on Google. We began to look at free prosthetic legs. Like, is there anyone in this world who is giving out free prosthetic legs? We'll get one, we'll get her there, and we'll get her a leg. We found this clinic in India, Jaipur Foot Clinic, and as we began to learn about it, we were just amazed. The guy who runs it is Dr. Mehta, and I was telling you earlier, he's like a modern day Gandhi. This is a non-profit organization. So if you live in India and you are an amputee, and there's lots of amputees in India just because of the traffic accidents and other things. If you're an amputee in India, you can get on the train anywhere in India, and you can bring your family, and you can arrive in Jaipur and come to the Jaipur Foot Clinic. You don't need an appointment. You just walk up, and you will be taken care of. They will put your family up, and for after 2 to 3 days, you will walk out of that clinic with a prosthetic leg for free. Okay. We were just amazed. So we wrote Dr. Mehta, and we got an immediate response. And here's what he said. He said, I love your story. This is an incredible story that you two would go halfway around the world to rescue this woman. He said, bring her to Jaipur. We will put a leg on her. She will walk out of this place.
So amazing.
So we just to end that part of it, we began to go to the local high school. And we knew Dan Williams, who headed the Matt Academy at Santa Barbara High School. And we said, hey, as we go on this trip, we really would like to bring some students with us that may be interested in film, that may be interested in, just letting the world know what this journey is about. And we'd love them to come with us. So we had 5 students that signed up with us, and 2 of them were young filmmakers out of Santa Barbara High School. And so they began this process with the idea that they were going to actually film a documentary. So they were on the trip. The second part of that, I'm an alumni of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I contacted Cal Poly to say, hey, do you have any engineers in your program up here that would like to be part of this journey? So we began to work with the senior engineers at Cal Poly, and Cal Poly became very interested in this project. In fact, the president of Cal Poly loved what was going on, and we had 5 of those senior engineers come on this trip as well. So now we have 5 students that are high school students, 5 engineering students, and they're all coming with us on this journey. Now, we got to go down to Mozambique and pick her up, and then we've got to bring her up to Jaipur, in order for her to receive a leg.
Unbelievable. And that had to have been a transformational trip for those students as well. But long story short, she gets the leg. And I watched a video of her walking back into her village and seeing the reactions of the people in her village is just powerful. And there was a cashew tree. Those cashews that were in her pocket went into the ground, and actually a tree emerged and I was just thinking about, there's so much depth to that one part of that book, just that out of brokenness, it's like the seed going into the ground. Yeah. A seed can sit on this table for 75 years and nothing happens, and it goes in the ground and magic happens. There's something about dying, there's something about that. I thought about that story about the cashews going into the ground, and then now we have this fruit. I mean, it's amazing what happened to you, and that's one of the things that I think is I mean, it was inspiring to me that here's a guy who has made it up the ladder, made the money, had success, family, the kids, the house, everything, beautiful city, everything is kind of in order, and yet, maybe the seed was still on the ground, on the table, and then through this experience, there's a brokenness that happened, is the way you described it to me. But talk a little bit more kind of about what happened in your heart. I mean, and what's it been like since? Because clearly you haven't forgotten this. Clearly this is still, the 2002 experience, and then of course what's happened since. But clearly that 2002, that breaking, that encounter you had with Jesus, it has not faded away. No. And you can't forget it. But talk about it a little bit.
Well, let me begin with the cashew, and that is that at that moment in time when she went to collect the firewood, she had these cashews. Now, if you look just on Google and you look up cashew trees in Mozambique, there's cashew trees all over the country. I mean, and they sell them, and as you're driving on the roads, they have them hanging from bags. But she had a couple cashews in her pocket, and it drops out. It goes into the ground. And so when we all went back there in 2015, and we had all the students surrounding, and we came around the area where she had lost her leg, where the landmine had blown up her leg, there's a beautiful cashew tree. And we end our book talking about that, because it really is the story, not just of Florencia, but it's our story. It's my story, and I think it's a lot of people's story, and that is, something has to die in us in order for there to be life. And I know that it was interesting when I came back from Mozambique, because at some level I was a changed person, but my cashew needed to die more in the ground over the coming years. So I became one of the largest boutique builders here in Santa Barbara, and we got to 2008. And I remember it well, like in the downturn in the economy and that recession that we went through, it was as if I now was going to descend to a deep, dark place. I was a very wealthy person. I lived in Hope Ranch, which is a beautiful community here in Santa Barbara. And what happened to me was I had to come to a place where I was working deals out with the banks. I was basically coming from my high place, and God had a plan for me. And I think when I think of the kingdom of God as a CEO of some companies, I think, we often live in this world, or this narrative where we're in a top-down, a CEO, and then we have all these employees, and we have the people who serve us. Well, the kingdom of God is an inverted pyramid. It's a kingdom where Jesus says, no, it isn't about being on top. It's about who can rush to the bottom the fastest. And yet we don't realize that in this American culture. And so I literally was forced into that place where I'm selling things, I'm selling assets. I had, rentals. All of this was sold in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Right
Yeah.
Because I was talking to somebody who knows you. I've never told you this, and he was describing that period. He said, John Mullen is an honorable man. He walked into those banks and did the right thing. He was just talking about how you handled. The 2008 was a bloodbath for everybody. In terms of this industry. But he said he just mentioned that to me one time. He's like, he did the honorable. He did the right thing. He did not leave, just cut and run. He was. Which I thought, anyway, I just wanted to tell you that.
Well, I appreciate that. But going through it at the time, it was very, very difficult because we're raising our kids. We're living here in Santa Barbara, and Santa Barbara, like a lot of wealthy communities, is an uppity community. It's like, what car are you driving? What like the clothes on your back. Do you shop at Nordstrom's? All of this, right? And it's like I'm in this free fall. And it's like, well, who am I going to become? And I think during that time, I believe one of the questions that I was asking God is, God, who do you want to be for me right now? Like, who do you want to be for me? And I felt like he said, I want to be that. I want to be your Savior like I was in Mozambique in 2002.
Wow.
I want you to walk with me in the brokenness of your life. And as I began to walk in that brokenness, I realized I'm a wealthy man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the wealthiest guy on the planet. I'm wealthy. I'm just wealthy in the things that God has given me in His kingdom and the resources in my life with my family, but just knowing Jesus at a deep level. And I feel like, so many of my friends that have been wealthy, and nothing against wealth, they have not descended through those dark places of being the cashew that goes into the ground.
Right.
And I think God wants to take us there because He wants us to meet Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, it can be so hard when you have money and power. The Scripture says it, but the reason is because you're insulated, protected. You have insurance on your insurance, and so to become a broken person is a really tricky thing. Unless barring something like what happened to you. And I will say that John has done some amazing things in the community, and one of them is called Believer's Edge, where for 11 years he taught 400 lessons on life and leadership to men, transforming lots of men in the community. So I wanted to mention that as well. That's been a wonderful fruit of all this. But last thing, we only have a couple minutes, but identity. I always think about identity. And I think what we've just described sounds a little bit like, I always talk about the fake ID, the fake IDs we all carry around.
Right.
The fake ID that says that I'm the businessman. I think you can even idolize your family. Or have your ID being in, I'm the dad of these perfect children, which we're all broken up pretty quickly. Sure. But the fake IDs, it's kind of like, trading those in for the real one, the son, the beloved. Talk a little bit about that and kind of what happened for you.
Well, I would say when I look at the scriptures, I probably don't have a favorite scripture, but I have a favorite theme, and it's being the beloved son, and I think how for in the New Testament, how to the Jew, they're watching this person Jesus, right, and he starts talking to his father and using the word Abba. Like daddy. Now this is a radical term, because they felt so distant from their Father in heaven. And I think of that one scene where John the Baptist is baptizing Jesus, right? And Jesus comes out of the water, and the heavens open, and the Father says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And what I love about that image is that Jesus hadn't accomplished anything. He didn't have any degrees, didn't have a successful business, didn't have 250 employees. He was just a son. And the Father said, I am pleased in you. And I think of that story and think that I have received that from my Father in heaven, that like my identity is not in my business. It's not in the things that I do. It's who I am. So my Father has said, look at, you're my beloved son. I'm pleased in you. So I came to a place in my life where I realized he can't love me any more than he loves me right now. Like I'm a beloved son, and we all are. We're beloved sons and daughters of our Father in heaven. And when I think of my life that way, I think, I, of all men, am wealthy beyond anything I could ever imagine. So there's nothing in this world that can reach that level of my Father saying, you're my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased.
John has a TED Talk. Can people access that?
Yes.
How do they find it?
It's a TEDx talk at Oaks Christian.
Right. It's a TEDx talk at Oaks Christian where John tells this story of Florencia, and then she comes on stage, and I'm getting chills just talking about it. It's magical. So watch it. We'll put the link up. And again, before we go, I wanted to mention. So Florencia, this is the book is called Florencia: An Accidental Story. Douglas Bowman and John D. Mullen. I think you'll love it. We're going to have some of these at the Turner Foundation as well. So if you need to get a hold of us, we'd love to get you a copy. But it's Florencia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's been
a pleasure.
What a wonderful story. What a wonderful journey you've been on.
And if I could just thank you for the Turner Foundation, because you. Some years ago I met you, and brought my children down to the Village Apartments, and just was able to minister alongside you. It's just been amazing to see what your foundation has done in this city.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember that. Somebody asked me the other day, how did you meet John Mullen? I said, I think he just walked in the door. Yeah, I do. Maybe God sent him, I don't know. But he was like he just walked in. And I remember learning from you so much. And it was powerful for me then and now. So thank you for the impact you've had in my life. You've really impacted my life a lot.
Great,
so,
thank you.
Thank you. We're having this moment on
we
TV.
We are.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
I feel a bit caught in between at times because, like I've told my children for years, when God calls you to be a bridge, you have to expect that you're going to get stepped on every now and then.
Likely that a traumatized person will cause more trauma. It's also true that a cherished person will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others.
Notion of justice and fairness just always appealed to me. Justice was my calling, not just a career. Pursuing justice for the poor and less privileged has been like the greatest adventure of my life.
Find a mentor, find a coach, because in the coach there is the man who's climbed the mountain, you just begin, or summited the mountain, you just beginning to climb. It's just wisdom.
I just want people to become friends with the author so that they can have that perspective on life and realize that they were made on purpose, for a purpose, and they're on the stage of the world right now to play an important role.
If you want something, you have to really articulate what it is. You have to say it out loud, and then you have to be willing to receive that too, and be willing to feel that you're worthy of receiving that.
Partisan legislatures in Congress are meant to debate.
Right.
To be passionate about your differences, different points of views.
Right.
But they're not supposed to be such that you hate one another or that you demagogue one another.
And that's the great thing about it, because nobody's better than anybody else. We all got the moment of today, of right now, to be the best person that we can be, and most importantly, take the gift that we've been given and give it away to other people, because I know I can't keep it unless I give it away.
I guess just to build knowledge and awareness of it, so people can have a better understanding of what it is. I think having those conversations builds empathy, and with empathy comes solidarity.
When I see positive things happen in the world, when I see stories that young kids, something fantastic happens to them, those are the good things in life. And when you can do things like that, that you can help someone maybe achieve some of their goals in life.
This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. What is Good Life TV, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. Good Life TV exists to inspire, empower, educate, and encourage. Those are the things we want to do in a rough year that we're having. We want to encourage you. We want to inspire you. We're telling stories. They're real life stories. They're not all celebrities. They're people from all walks of life. And I think you're really going to be encouraged. There's a bunch of them at goodlifetelevision.org. So go there today, goodlifetelevision.org. Get encouraged. We love you. God bless you. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us today. And you can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where we have all the interviews, the full interviews, as well as what we call power clips, which are just some of the great moments from those interviews. We've had, I think, 90 so far, and people from all walks of life, all career paths, public service, law enforcement, executives, young people, famous people, not famous people. It's been a real blend of people that have great stories and are doing great work. So we think you'll enjoy it. goodlifetelevision.org. My guest today is also doing great work and has done great work. He's a Santa Barbara police officer. Adrian Guiterrez is with me. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And specifically, Officer Guiterrez is involved in the PAL program, which a lot of people are familiar with, but in case you're not, does it still stand for the Police Athletic League? Activities?
Activities League.
Was it the Athletic League?
Athletic Leagues, it started in the East Coast.
Okay.
Because they were focused a lot on sports.
But now, it's activities.
Yes, and now because you have educational stuff.
Right. It's more than just sports.
Absolutely.
Right. So Police Activities League, he's involved in it in addition to lots of other things. But when I was reading about you, the first thing that kind of stuck with me was that you grew up in the neighborhood where you've served quite a bit in your long 20-year career? 21 years. Talk about kind of growing up there and then your road to where you are now.
Well, too bad we have a little bit of time and not too much. I was born in Mexico, in Jalisco, Mexico. And we immigrated to Santa Barbara directly. I was about 7 years old. I grew up on the east side on Voluntario Street. And, back then, my parents, didn't have jobs, but my mom became a house cleaner. She cleaned homes, and my father was a tailor. But he was a tailor, and then he also worked at a lemon packing company right near the railroad tracks. He hurt himself and could not work hard labor anymore, so he continued doing the tailoring. He'd make pants, and I don't think we ever bought any clothes in the store because he made everything. And my mom continued cleaning till her last days. She loved it. So growing up in the neighborhood was a challenge for me initially because of the language barrier. Because I'd get bullied, I'd get made fun of, and to be honest with you, I was scared of police.
Really?
I was scared of police because my parents instilled that in us, because back in the hometown in Mexico, police were not to be trusted. So every time we'd see a police officer, my father would shake. We'd be driving and he'd just pull into any random driveway just to get away from them. So it was a challenge growing up with the language. And during that time also there was quite a bit of gang activity. Luckily for me, I was able to play soccer, and I love soccer. So even though we didn't have money, and even back then it was so expensive to play in club teams, there was a lot of people in the community that would take me in and let me play on their teams without paying. So that was a huge help for me.
Wow.
So through that, I was able to continue, keep myself out of trouble. I won't say I was perfect, but that kept me busy.
Wow.
So, but being from an old school machista father, it was difficult because, I think I was more scared of my father than I was police.
Really?
So I think that kept me out of trouble as well.
Right.
So
that's a great reminder. I mean, hearing you say there was somebody who would cared about me enough to let me come on the team, and that kept you away from the gangs. That those people, the people that step in to do something like that, it seems so small, but it's so big. I mean, if you think about it. Think about, what you just said, here's a trajectory, here's one way, here's another way. And because somebody did that, you were able to stay on a good path. That's really...
They were like second fathers to me.
That's incredible. That's incredible. 21 years on the PD. We've had an interesting year or so in many respects. Obviously, we're in a pandemic, and as we tape this, we're still in a pandemic. And then we had a lot of this unrest in the country, and there's been a lot of discussion about the police and about, the relationship between the police and the community. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading about you is you have had a very active role in the community, which from my perspective just seems like a model, because I feel like a lot of these walls that are erected would be broken down if there was more of this. And that's just my opinion. But I wanted to start, before we get to your activities in the community, I wanted to start with just this job. Because I think, and we were talking about this earlier, I think that it can be, people may not understand how tricky, difficult, whatever you want to call it, this job is. It's not just about putting your lights on, pull somebody over, write a ticket. Like, there's so much. I was saying to somebody else who was here in public service, like you, I think it was a fireman, that you're not called because there's good news. The only calls you get is because it's bad, and it's so bad that the people there couldn't handle it. But talk about, because 21 years is a long time to be in this profession, and especially when we know that you guys can carry a lot of stuff with you because of what you see. But talk about your road as a police officer and kind of how you've managed to keep going for 21 years.
Of course. So if you would have told me in high school I was going to be a police officer, I would have laughed, because that wasn't my goal. And a lot of people think we start off knowing what we want to do, and I wanted to be a professional soccer player.
Oh, really?
After high school, I became an auto mechanic. And through there, I decided, because there was a reserve police officer that worked next to me, and I kept bugging him every time he came on Mondays, who he arrested, if we knew them. I was being just nosy. And I think he got tired of it. So he said, why don't you just become one? So I did. I went back to school, became a reserve officer, and then I went full time. My father was kind of ill when I was at the academy. He was ill. And the only graduation he attended of mine was that. And one thing he told me, and I'll never forget, don't forget where you came from. Help people like us. And it stuck with me. And in all reality, when I became a police officer and became a reserve officer, that was my goal. I wanted to change things that I saw growing up. And so for me, and this job was not difficult for me. Yes, we saw many things. Yes, there were sleepless nights. But in reality, it's how you treat people and how you respect people and turn those bad situations into good ones where you can offer some help. Even if it's just a hug or just, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
If you hear that from a police officer, I think it goes a long way.
It does. Yeah.
Because we have a bad rap to begin with. So we need to change that. So throughout my career, that was my philosophy, and it still is. I'm back as working in the community now. I'm a new community liaison officer now. And I teach at the academy that. So I teach community-oriented policing now. You mentioned PAL. PAL, working with the youth is so important right now.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these kids don't have a father figure or don't have someone to look up to.
Right.
And they're not just going to feel safe with anybody. Of course, initially when we meet them, they're going to, oh no, like I was. But once they get to know you, they feel safe. PAL is one example. They can go there and feel safe. I served on the state and national PAL board because I believe in it, and I'll help any organization here. So I think key to my, I don't want to say success, but my working with the community is respecting people and treat them well.
Yeah.
That's it.
Speaking of PAL, I think it's been in Santa Barbara for 22 years or so. And you've probably been there since close to the beginning.
Yes, I was kind of the second PAL officer.
Were you really?
So, yeah.
Talk about what you've seen there over 20 plus years, and the impact that it has. I mean, you kind of just described a little bit, but talk about the impact PAL can have and what makes it kind of a special thing.
First, I want to say there are many organizations that work with youth here that are awesome. The city of Santa Barbara is full of great organizations that have great programs and good people. PAL is just another one. But what's unique for us is that we have officers involved in the PAL program. So what I've seen throughout the years with our youth is that they get to see us more on a human side. So we'll go camping, we'll go take them to trips, we'll go to Disneyland. We've taken many, trips to Disneyland where some of these kids have never been there, and they're just having us next to them makes them feel safe. And for us, it's great because now they know we're really not robots. We're really not mean, So I think that has, in a nutshell, I think just having the police involvement and the safety part of it, it makes them feel comfortable. Yeah. And in addition, we have great programs for them, and we'll get them engaged with them. So, and with the parents, the parents, they themselves feel more comfortable speaking to us. Whereas before they started PAL, they would just wait in the parking lot for them to come in and out. Now they come in and speak to us and ask us questions, and sometimes we're there for 2 hours and we're talking about stuff.
So it's good for the kids and the parents.
Overall, I think it's a great for all of us.
That's neat. Before we came on, we were talking about the Citizens Academy, which I'd never heard of, and maybe other people have not heard of that. But describe what that is and what people might want to know about it.
Citizens Academy is a 8 to 12 week course that we offer for citizens of the city of Santa Barbara. We have it in English, and we also have it in Spanish. We don't ask for any immigration papers. We don't ask for any citizenship. We accept everybody. Of course, we check their records and make sure we're not getting someone that's, not a good person. Right. But we accept everybody. So in that class, we'll meet once a week, 2 to 3 hours for 8 weeks. And every day we have a different subject. We'll talk about, and we'll ask at the beginning, what is everybody interested in learning? So basically what it is, we want to show them what we do and explain to them why we do certain things, and we're there to answer any questions for them. So every week it's something different, and on one of those days we put them through scenarios. Like, we get actors, and we see how they react. We give them fake money, and we go, and then here they run into someone mugging them, or someone want to steal their car. So we put props. They come back with no shoes, no chains. They give everything, but we teach them. We kind of explain to them it's not good to fight them. Just give up your purse, and for your safety. So there's benefits in many. It's fun. They have a great time, and again, that's on both English and Spanish academies.
Yeah, I think just like with anything, the more we know each other, the more we are in relationship, the better. Because before we came on here, you were talking about the Citizens Academy and just the teaching that goes on. Why is it that we have sometimes 4 police cars for one pulling over one car? And you were helping just me, little old me, understand why that is. Whereas I never knew the answer to that. And you might think, oh, this is a little heavy-handed, do we have to? But then you were describing why, and I was like, okay. And I just think that's, and I'm assuming that's a big part of what happens at Citizens Academies. All of a sudden people understand. Is that right?
That is correct. And we have them act out some of these. And we ask them, how would you do this? And then we point out, okay, see what you did here, you could have gotten injured. This is why we do this. Or this is our procedure. And that's, it's for our safety and other people's safety. It's not just because we want to do that. So and they understand it.
Before I move on PAL, how has been the COVID response, or what has changed, or is it kind of shut down? What's happened during the pandemic?
Of course, like any other programs, they're limited with how many students you can have. You have to have an outdoor area. So for PAL, we've been able to finally have an open area outside where we have them social distancing, and we help them with their Zoom classes, like many organizations are doing right now. And then once they're done with that, they'll play activities outside. We have, for example, a couple officers that come every Wednesday, and they play, catch with them, and they'll do, and so we'll keep them busy until their parents pick them up.
They're finding a way to keep.
Yes.
You from 7 on, sounds like you were raised on the east side of Santa Barbara, where we are right now. And then you were a beat coordinator on the east side. You've been a beat coordinator on the east side. What was that like?
Well, I was a patrol when I first started on the east side.
Okay.
And it was great because I can go home and get something to eat, and but I didn't do that too often. But I knew everybody. Everybody knew me, and it was like being home, And then some of the officers would ask me, "How can you work where you live? Don't you, how can you live where you work? Do they give you problems?" I go, again, it goes back to how you treat people. Mm-hmm. And they know me, and I'm not going to change. The gangsters know me. I'll mow my lawn, and they come by, and they just say hi, But
really,
I guess they probably treat me like one of their own from the east side. I'm from the area, so they have that respect.
Wow.
But once you mistreat people or you start talking, then that's when we have problems.
Yeah.
But no, it was great. And till this day, as a beat coordinator, I also worked on the east side. And when I went back recently to patrol, I worked the east side. So I've been on the east side most of my career, but I've done a lot throughout the city on the west side as well.
Yeah,
so
that's so great. I think we are kind of spoiled in this country. It got me thinking about it when you were talking about your dad and his response to the police because of his experience in Mexico. And I was thinking back to my experience in Mexico, actually, once when we had to bribe an officer for we didn't do anything wrong, but yet here we were bribing this guy on the side of the road to and I think sometimes we can take for granted in this country what a blessing it is to have honest, upright, again 99.9% probably honest, upright, noble people that go into this noble profession. Yes. So I wanted to say that to say thank you, because it's people like you. I can tell just being around you for half an hour that I'd want you to show up at my door. I mean, for good reasons. I do have some parking tickets out there that we but it is a noble profession, and to have noble people that go into it for the right reasons and then do it in a way that they care about the relationships, because you do live in the community, and that's beautiful. I mean, and I think that's a great thing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for coming on.
Anytime.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.